All right, we're back. So let's take a look at step 15. You should find that down here somewhere around about line 78, 79. So line break. So if we wanted to, yeah, it's not very often, but from time to time you want to force the browser to render a line break. So if we go down here, for example, with this code, maybe perhaps I don't want this paragraph here. Maybe I want to break a line right here. So I want this following to be over here. So what I can do is right before the point where I want to break to a new line, and break is an empty element, so it doesn't have an end tag. There is no start and end tag because break is kind of self-contained. So I can either use XML style syntax like this, or I can just use that. I prefer the XML style. Do whatever you wish. So I'll hit file save, and I'll reload the page, and you'll look here and see, there we go, it forces a line break, irrespective of where the end of the document window or anything else renders. So page breaks, use them sparingly, but sometimes they are a handy thing to have. Step 16, including a span element. So span elements are interesting. They're inline elements, so they usually go inside things like paragraphs and headings and things like that. So, but where they come in useful is where we don't have another kind of element to describe or to delineate a section of text, and we want to do something with it, either using CSS or maybe JavaScript or something like that. But in this case here, I have a paragraph that describes this particular footnote 1, and I have some part of this text is in French. My base language for the page up here is set on the HTML element with lang equal en, English. So this is, the whole page is English, but I do want to change the base language of the page for this small snippet of text. So the span element inside this paragraph might do the trick. So I can simply surround this and say span. And the span is generic. It doesn't really, all it says is spanning from here to here, and there's something special about this, and the part that something special is what you add. In this case, I'm going to add a lang attribute. I'm going to say that the part that spans from here to here is language French. So I'm going to add the lang attribute here, breaking from the rest of the page, and off we go. So save that. Refresh the page. Reload the page here, and so that that may not do anything particularly interesting because span doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't change the rendering of the page. But what it might do is if this page is being read by a code or by a screen reader, it would impart a French accent to that rather than try to read it as if it were English. Span. There are all kinds of uses for span. You would use span when you don't have another element that is appropriate. So basically there's no other element that fits. So it's, in some ways it's a bit of an element of last resort per se, but it's inline. It would go inside of other elements like headers, footers, block quotes, things like that. Great. So off we go to step 17. Add a page header. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add kind of some higher level structure to this page. So this page has, we have a main heading, we have a subheading, a subheading, a subheading, a subheading, another subheading here. So we've kind of got and some content, some paragraphs, and some block quotes and things like that. So we have kind of a basic document outline, but we want to add kind of like some bigger content blocks to the page. So we can imagine the page as a newspaper article, a front page on a newspaper, or a page in a magazine. There's going to be several large kind of identifiable blocks of content. The first thing is the page has a header, and that will include things like the primary heading, some branding elements, some other, maybe some global navigation. So the first thing we do in step 17 here is we're going to add a header, and the header looks like this. And in this case, the only things that will belong in the header will be our primary page heading, or H1. So this kind of allows us to kind of add that kind of scaffolding to the page, if you will. Now, after the header, directly after the header, we have kind of the main body of the page. You can almost imagine that kind of hamburger structure. We have a bun on the top, we have the meat patty, and the condiments inside, and then we have the bun on the bottom, which is the footer. So here we have the main part of the page, and we'll add that here at step 18, and we'll surround everything on the page. We'll scroll all the way down to the bottom here, just before we, maybe not quite the bottom, but just here. And around about just after after the text here that says step 12, we will close out the main element of the page. And so that means our main surrounds most of the content, and the remaining content with this small print here and these other attributions and all this other kind of footnotes and with thanks and things like that. This is all kind of page footer information. It has to be there, for example, maybe for legal purposes. So step 19, add your footer after we close out the page level main element, and then we go down here, and just before we close out the body, watch your formatting, we will close out the page level footer. File save. Now the interesting thing is it doesn't do a whole lot visually, if anything, to the page, but it now allows us to structure, and the interesting thing is here I can most code editors, I can navigate into the margin here where the line numbers are, and you get a little arrow or a little toggle that allows you to open and close these nodes. So I can close the head, I can close the body, right? Open and close the body, and then I can. Oh, this code's kind of messed me up a little bit. Did I not open up the footer? I thought I opened up the footer. I'll open that. So the head, body, header, main. Did they not close out the main? Oh, they did. There it is. And the footer. So I'll try that again here. We'll close the page level header. The main doesn't seem to be. Maybe I've broken my. I could have broken my HTML. There's something unclosed here causing me. Interesting. Any block quote. Interesting. Yeah, I think I've broken something. Interesting. Maybe my comments have broken that out. So anyhow, I digress. So I'll open up the header there. Suffice it to say that the main, so we have our body, which breaks down into the header, the main, and the footer. So we'll go by now to step 18. We've already done it, 18, yet the page main, 19. So we'll go to page step 20. Is where, now we turn our attention to the main element, and this page, the main part of the page here is we have 1, 2, 3 kind of blocks of content that are kind of the same. They have a title, they have a timestamp, they have an attribution to or a timestamp, and then an author. We've addressed an author. We have a figure element. This one, I don't know if we have a figure. Maybe that's what I put. And then we have a kind of a synopsis of the article, and then a read more. So we actually have 3 kind of short articles here. So we can take a look and say, okay. Oh no, sorry. Let's step back for a second. Let's step 20. We're going to add the section. So we're going to section out the main. We'll section out the main. There's a section that contains 3 articles, and then there's a section that contains kind of did you know, kind of tangentially related information here. So I'm going to break the main section into a first section and then an aside. So the first section, step 20. So we're going to add here. We're going to say section. And this section will encapsulate all 3 of those articles: the bowline article, the figure 8 article and the square knot, and then I close out. Watch your formatting. End of section. That, and then the rest of this information inside the main is kind of tangentially related information. It's kind of did you know kind of stuff. So what I can do is I can say, okay, this is great. Let's call this an aside. And this would surround everything all the way down to we close out the main element here. So end of aside. And there we go. So the main is now subdivided into 2 sections. One's a section and one's an aside. You can have as many sections as you want. And inside a section, you can have a header and a footer if you want. We're not going to get that fancy with our section. But now the next step is to take our section element and and our section element is we're going to break the section into those 3 articles that we talked about. So step 22. Did I miss step 21? That must be in oh, that was the aside. I've already done that, so I'm driving all over the place here. Step 22. So we're going to divide up these three articles with, you guessed it, an article element. And I've done a little bit of tabbing in here to kind of suggest, where those plots. And notice how the section has an article as its child, and then the article has all of these elements in it: the H2, the time, and then we can close out this. End of article here. End of article. Spell it right. And then the next one, here's the one on the figure 8. So I'll just tidy this up here. And then we begin a new article here. So there's kind of 3 articles side by each, and this has the same form, the same kind of structure, the H2, the figure, and a paragraph. And then we finish up this article about the figure 8, and then we have the square knot here. Is another opening up a 3rd article element. We have all the kind of synopsis of the article for the square knot, and then we close that out. End of article, and then we close our section, and then we have our side, block quote, and close the aside, close the main, and then we're into the footer. And that's it. So now although once we save that, file save, that doesn't do anything particularly interesting visually to the page, right? But that scaffold is now there, and that's in place. And it's really important to have that larger document structure where we have, we have the HTML, the head section, the body, and the body needs to be broken down into a page level header, a main, which you can only use once in the page in the template, and a footer. And then the inside the main, you would then subdivide, and you could subdivide your header as well, and maybe your header has sections in it. I don't know. Maybe your footer has sections. And then the main section, of course, you'll probably have 1 or more sections, maybe some articles, some asides. But we use these are called kind of semantic sectioning elements to kind of provide those bigger buckets in which to put our flow content and our phrasing elements, which are things like paragraphs and M's and all that kind of thing. So that's great. Well done. That kind of concludes our short kind of lesson, 3rd lesson on formatting text.